So looking at number 1, if I have a fraction equal to another fraction, how can I solve that? Okay, and actually you can do it that way. So so what would the common denominator be on that one? Okay, so if I want to make it 8, then I've got to multiply both the top and the bottom by 2. So I've got 10 over 8 equals 2x over 8. Okay, and now what can I do on this? Yeah, you would solve, but what does that entail? Nope. Okay, not cross multiply. In fact, cross multiplication is the answer I was expecting to get on this. And this is going to be kind of the method that I'm going to show you in a little bit. If I was to do it this way, and I think on the more complicated problems that you'll see, solving it by using the common denominator is the easiest, because once you have the common denominator throughout the whole problem, whether it's 2 fractions, 3, whatever, I can completely ignore the denominators, and I'm going to just make an equation out of my numerators. And then 10 divided by 2 would be 5. All right.
So why can't you just do 4 times 10?
I could have just as easily done 4 times 10, 8 times x, which is that's just cross multiplication or butterfly method, however you were taught that, and then divide by 5. All right. Whenever we get into the our rational problems, ones with polynomials in there, if it is a very simple problem, I would do cross multiplication. If it looks more complicated, this is going to be the easier way. Okay, and we'll walk through examples of both. Looking at number 2, if I cross multiply on that, you've got to be careful whenever you do 10 times x plus 5, because you cannot just do 10 times x. You've got to do 10 times 5 as well. Okay, after that, I would subtract 50, divide by 10. To make sure we're good on factoring, number 3, what factors of 15 add up to negative 16? Negative 15 and negative 1. Number 4, what factors of negative 2 add up to negative 1? Negative 2 and positive 1. Okay, coming down here to 5 and 6, which you saw examples of this. You saw a similar thing on the skills check, and I had some people asking how to factor that. Or maybe that was first period, but either way. How do I factor both of those? Factor out an x. Do not get 6 confused with this. Alright, if it was that, I would have x plus 2, x minus 2. There's a big difference between those two answers right there. Okay. Alright, so let's go down and look at the first few examples here. Alright, solving them as proportions. All that means is one fraction equal to another. Now, whenever I'm doing this, and again, you're going to have to look at this to determine, okay, is just doing cross multiplication, is that easier, or do I want to find the common denominator and so I can just deal with the numerators? You'll have to figure out which way you want to do it. If your denominators are just linear factors, I would just cross multiply. Okay, the only problem is you still have to find what the excluded values would be. So on this, you would need to put that x could not equal 1. And what else could x not equal on this problem? Do what? Okay, I get it from 4x plus 5, but what would that give me? If I set that equal to 0, what would I do first? Subtract 5. Then what would I do? Divide by 4. So negative 5 over 4. That's really the only, well, it's really one of the only issues about cross multiplication. There's really no good point to stop and find those except at the very beginning. Right? But from here I would just cross multiply. So I would have 9 times x plus 1, 3 times 4x plus 5. I would then distribute my 9 and my 3. And after that I would solve. So I would subtract 12x to the left to get negative 3x. I would subtract 9 to get 6. And x would equal negative 2. Alright, look at number 2. So first thing again I want to do is to factor. So on the denominator of that first one, what factors of 9 add up to negative 6? Negative 3 and negative 3. The denominator of the second fraction. Can I factor anything out of that? X. Before I go on, do what? Can I cancel it out? No, it has to be on bottom and top. So what would my excluded values be? Negative 3, positive 3, what else? 0, because of that right there. Sorry, it should not be. I should not have a negative 3 in there. Just positive 3. Now, looking at that, something can cancel. What is it? The x. So on this problem, what would my common denominator be? Okay. Is that all? Do what? You're going to need 2 of them on this one. Okay? Because since we didn't add either one of these, okay, because we don't have an x minus 3 up here, that's how we know we would have. Since this one has 2 of them, I've got to have 2 of them on there. So on this second fraction, I need to add an x minus 3. I'll go ahead and... we don't have too much all in one step. If you're still using the colored pencils, it doesn't matter which color you make it. Okay. Getting to this point in these problems is the hardest part. Okay? Because after that, I'm going to look at this. I can ignore the denominator if I get them all the same. I'm just going to make a problem out of my numerator. And then I solve it from there. So I would distribute my 3. Add 9. Whenever I divide by 3, x equals 6. So, looking at number 3. First, what is my denominator for that? 1. Okay. X over 1 is the same as x. So the next thing I would need to look to do is to factor, which nothing can factor. So what could I make my common denominator? Just x minus 2. Which means what is the only term, okay, that I need to apply the common denominator to? The first one. So I'll have x times x minus 2 over x minus 2. And then just the rest of the equation that I've got there. All right. Malachi, what would be my only excluded value on this one? I can ignore all of my denominators. I'll need to distribute the x into that first one. Oh, sorry. I don't know why I was writing x right there. That should be 2. This should also be 2. Make sure you corrected that. I had x's written in those 2 spots. That should have been 2. So I'm going to distribute the x into that x minus 2. I'm also going, now if I'm solving this, what does that mean what does that tell me I'm going to have to do? Not square root. Do what? Factor. Which means I have to have it set equal to what? 0. So I would subtract that 2. I want to combine my like terms. And what factors of negative 2 adds up to negative 1? Someone said it. Negative 2 and positive 1. Okay. And then whenever I set those equal to 0, I've got 2 and negative 1, so which one is my answer? Negative 1. Because 2 cannot be an answer according to my excluded value. Yes. After this next problem. You'll be okay. Questions on this one? You got it, Trevor? Alright, so what's the only part of this problem that I can factor? What is the only part of this problem that I can factor? X squared minus 4x. What can I do to that? So on this, Lisa Betta, what would one of my excluded values be? Set it equal to 0 and solve. So positive 4. Jen, what would the other one be? 0. Right. Brianna, what would my common denominator be? What else do I need to include in there? X. This first fraction right here, is that missing any part of the common denominator? No. The second fraction, what is that missing? X minus 4. What is the last fraction missing? X. So I want you to set up an equation with the numerators, see if you can figure out what x equals.